Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. We're here at GearFest 2011, and I am joined by producer, engineer, mixer, musician, arranger, composer, music consultant, educator, David Isaac. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having
it, man.
me.
We're glad to have you here at GearFest. And we just finished a workshop with you where you were talking about some of your techniques of using universal audio plugins and things. But let's step back before we talk about the plugins. Let's step back a little bit and talk about your career. You're a 3-time Grammy winner. And you started out in Detroit during the Motown era. Can you tell us a little bit about how that led you into getting into production?
Seeing the artists around the neighborhood, as I played as a kid outside, and being able to go indoors in the evening and watch them on TV with my parents was the beginning of it. The neighborhood sang of music. It wasn't just people playing the Motown records. You would hear the Motown artists singing around, or you hear the people in the streets singing under the street lights trying to be discovered, or you had families who wanted to be involved, whether it was creating the uniforms or the dance steps or to do the hair and things like that. So
sure.
The streets just sang of music. Motown wasn't just a label, it was the neighborhood.
And you got into playing music fairly early yourself.
Yeah, in 3rd grade.
Right. Yeah,
playing guitar,
right.
and it grew into bass by high school, and playing and working in the studio with acts like George Clinton or some things with the Dramatics and other groups around town.
So tell us about your very first session.
Well, actually, I was just supposed to be going to view the session, and George Clinton saw the size of my hands and asked me to be one of the clappers for a particular song.
Right, so the very first thing you appeared on was as a clapper on a Parliament song.
Yeah.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, how did you move more into the engineering production side of things?
In playing guitar in the studio, not knowing what to tell the engineer. And the engineers around that time, you really had to know what you were talking about, or else they didn't want to hear it. So for me, it was frustrating not knowing what to tell them as far as what I wanted from my sound.
Right.
So, I was driven then to learn the dialogue and the terminology, but it ended up leading me into doing it myself. Instead of being able to tell them, I just decided to move their chair to the side and do it myself.
Right, right. Now, what was your first session as an engineer like?
After about 8 months of interning, there was a head engineer that at that particular time found a better paying gig, and the studio decided to call me and asked me did I want to do the gig, and I said yeah. And when I came in, the artist that walked in was Anita Baker.
Wow.
And it just changed.
What a great way to start. Right.
Yeah.
And then you had a long list of people that you worked with there in Detroit. Aretha Franklin, Gladys Knight, an incredible list of R. Kelly, just an incredible list of people. But what led you to make the move from there, since you were already successful working with these artists there, to out toward L.A.?
The feeling of having worked with everybody that I thought I could work with from there. And then I started to get calls outside of Detroit. Whitney Houston was one of the first to actually bring me out. But when I got to L.A. to work with Whitney Houston, the guys in L.A. were saying, man, you should come out here. You could really do some work if you were out here. And L.A. just intimidated me too much. So I went back to Detroit and just bought a bunch of manuals, close to, I'd say, 150 manuals.
Wow.
I couldn't afford the gear, but I could afford the manuals.
Right.
So I figured if I learned the manuals, I could come out and work the gear. Fortunately, I started getting calls from guys like Greg Fillinganes to talk him through a problem over the phone with one of his keyboards. And I said, there's nobody there that can help you with it? And he said, I just thought to call you. So I said, okay, it's time for me to go out.
That's a good sign,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So you arrived out there, and were you able to immediately get work? You were doing programming mainly at that point, or did it take a while to work in? Or?
The day I got to LA, I was working. That was engineering, but I also was programming on a lot of tours. For the first 8 months, there was a lot of tours, Madonna and Michael Jackson, things like that.
And people like Billy Idol, and a whole long list of artists in all kinds of different genres that you were working with. Now, from there, maybe one of the more important next steps is you hooked up with Marcus Miller. How did that come about?
A friend of mine, a drummer, Michael White, his cartage guy van broke down, and Michael was trying to get to the rehearsal. So I told him I'd come by and pick him up, and took him and the drums over, and he needed to get back. So I was able to hang and watch the rehearsal. And afterwards, I met Marcus, and he reminded me of Bruce Lee just on bass with his accuracy and his power. So Michael started to tell him about me, and Marcus was new to town and needed an engineer or somebody to work with him. So he asked me to come out to his house, and it started with EQing a loop here or there. During this one night that I was there, he had a couple things he pulled up, and I would EQ it. But fairly quickly, he liked it, and he asked me, was I busy, and did I want to work on some stuff with him? So I said, sure. And maybe 2 songs into the project, we started to produce together. He asked me if I wanted to produce it with him.
Right. Right. So can you define for us, in your terms, you're mainly doing, when we were talking earlier, production work. Can you define what a producer is in the styles of music that you work in?
Well, there's various producers out there now, beat maker producers, arranger producers, mix engineer producers. But for me, my style of producing is bringing out the best I can in everybody in the room. Whether it's the assistant engineer, the engineer, the runner, the musicians, the vocalists, everybody in the room. How can I bring everybody up?
Right.
And bring out the special talents and talents that they've maybe were shy to tell people that they were able to do, but bring out all the talents and capture the best spirit of that talent. Because that's what's going to eventually be used to move people around the world. So for me, it's how to bring up everybody's A game, which is to make sure there's no distractions and there's a clear focus as to what they're doing during that short period of time that they're recording. If the song is 5 minutes long, how can I make them focus on the meaning and the lyrics and the melody for 5 minutes without being distracted by anything? Right. If you can do that, now you can receive everything that you need to receive to get yourself into the place to record this one-take magical moment.
Right. So you prefer to work that way, to actually capture a performance as opposed to going back and having to edit and correct and fix and...
Yeah, that's not magic. That's just editing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, we're in that day and age where that's normal, but I don't prefer to do that because, if you record something based on knowing that you have 999 tracks and you have Melodyne and you have Auto-Tune and you have a guy that can fix it, that's the kind of performance and spirit that you're going to record. So, for me, if you're a vocalist, learn the song. Don't come in and read the lyrics while you sing, because now, would you do that on Broadway? Would you do that, when you're filming a movie?
Right.
You need to know it so you can come and be the part. So it's the same thing, don't be distracted by lyrics or other things.
All right, so the focus is the main thing.
Focus.
Right, right. Now you started out during the analog days and have moved now to where you're working in the digital realm. Can you tell us about some of the differences and how you made that progression?
For me, I knew that keeping my ear to the ground and understanding and accepting change was, going to also help me to have longevity. And plugins was something that I had been dying for, because in working with analog tape, if you're dealing with film producers and directors who wants to come by and see 10 cues, and you have to find which reel the cue is on, and take this reel off, pull up the other reel, recall the console, that could be an all-day thing. And with plugins, if it comes up with the project, I could show them 10 cues in there out in an hour. Right. So it was something that I was, dreaming about. I never knew it was going to come so soon. But, the ability to have some of the hardware and more that was around when I was coming up, like the 1176s and the 250 plates and things like that. Now as a plug-in, and you have the companies that created it working with the companies to make sure it sounds as close as possible. For 10 grand, I can have a virtual console wherever I go, virtual rack, everything's recallable with the project. Once it's open, it's there. I can come to your house and decide I'm going to use the SSL console today on all the tracks with Manley EQs and with Trident EQs. And that wasn't possible unless I had millions of dollars. And even still back then, it wasn't possible to move it all, just drive over to your house and it's set up. Right. Ready to go. Right. So for me, it's a dream come true to be able to have that kind of power now with projects and be able to go from a film to a TV project to Prince or whatever, all within a matter of hours. you know, without having to do the recalling and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So are you working 100% in the box now, or are you still using a console, still using outboard, or how are you doing things?
I'll still use outboard for certain things, but majority is in the box because too, I mean, we've become accustomed to it. You know, and nowadays, if you listen to something on the radio or if I play you a CD, you couldn't tell me what's hardware and what's software. It's a matter of how you use it. If you have $50,000 worth of hardware and you don't know how to use it, then why not have $10,000 of software? Because you don't know how to use it either. You know what I mean? It's all about how you use what you have.
Right.
You know, so for me, if you know what you have and how to use it, and you're not just using like what they say, most people use 10 or 15% of their brain, you learn your stuff, you can make it sound close enough to make someone feel like, man, that's incredible. And then if we're talking about, that sounds like hardware, that sounds like software, then the song must suck.
Right.
Because we're not concentrating on the song.
You're not hearing the song.
Yeah, we're not hearing the song.
Right, right. And that's really the main thing that you want to keep the focus on. Right.
Yeah.
So you're working with Universal Audio plugins mainly as your choice?
It's one of my main go-tos, yeah. You know, and then I have other plugins that are for surgical reasons. But yeah, I mean, you know, for me, the Universal Audio stuff has become home for me because I came up using 1176s and LA2As and the EMTs and stuff like that. So for me, if I pull it up and see that, it's like,
right,
you know,
right,
yeah,
like heading back home.
Yeah, exactly, a little bit of home.
Right, that's great. That's great, David. Thanks so much for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. The workshop was wonderful.
Thank you.
Got a lot out of it. Learned a lot myself. So I had a great time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.